February 1959. A group of 9 mountaineers embark on a winter trek into Russia's Ural Mountains. Their destination, a mountain called Otorten, which in the local Mansi language means, do not go there.
Among them were 3 experienced engineers, the rest were students. They were all young. I think the oldest was like 37 years old. They had conducted other hard treks to the area. They were all experienced, strong-willed, determined people.
On their 4th night out, bad weather forces the hikers to camp atop an area called Kholat Syakhl, which in Mansi translates to the mountain of the dead.
It was a very inhospitable, very strange, very hard place to be. Snow, cold, freezing winds, and very few living things around. They decided that they would spend the night of February 1st in an open area, not too far away from the top of the mountain. They didn't want to go back to the forest 1.5 kilometers because it would take them too much time and they would lose the day.
10 days later, when the 9 adventurers failed to show up at their destination, military rescue teams search the area. They find the hikers' camp abandoned and a tent that is badly damaged. The investigators determine that the tent has been cut and ripped open from the inside. And the hikers appeared to have fled the area in only socks or bare feet.
This tent had been cut with knives from the interior. It was absolutely obvious that neither animals nor people had approached the tent to break in, meaning that nothing from this earth had approached them.
Something was pushing them to run away without taking any clothing with them, without taking any supplies. They were behaving like they were in a daze, confused.
The investigators follow the trail to the edge of the forest. But what they eventually find is beyond belief.
All 9 hikers died. They were discovered by Soviet troops in various stages of what can only be described as being mutilated. Their bodies were burned, some suffered radiation poisoning. In one case, a hiker's tongue was missing. They had prematurely aged, their skin was orange, their hair had turned gray. What could have explained this?
3 of them had injuries that could be sustained when somebody is hit by a speeding car. Except the injuries were inside. Their ribs were crushed like eggshells. Some of them entered their hearts, but there was no effect on their skin. It was like a force was directed at all of them.
An unknown force had hit the hikers, and it was very selective in hitting only the hikers, leaving untouched the snow, the trees, and everything else around.
The official explanation was that the 9 died from hypothermia. But the chief investigator refused to sign off on the report and instead resigned from the inquiry.
When the investigation was taking place by the local officials, one of the people in charge was removed quite quickly from the very investigation because he was very thorough and local officials didn't want this to come out.
The authorities did their best to cover the whole thing up.
And to a more serious story now, the sole survivor of a Soviet mountaineering expedition that ended in 9 gruesome deaths has passed away. Yuri Yudin was 76. The deaths of his fellow climbers, known as the Dyatlov group after its leader, have never been explained and have inspired much speculation. Primetime Madina Kochinova can remind us of the mysterious details of this expedition. And just tell us first, Madina, good evening, what happened to the Dyatlov group?
Well, the incident involving the Dyatlov expedition group really remains one of the most mysterious facts that took place in the 20th century. And really, after so many years, after more than 50 years, nothing seems to add up to what exactly happened to these students. Now, the story began on the 23rd of January 1959, when a group of 10 students went for a ski hike to the northern Ural Mountains, and they were led by Igor Dyatlov, who was a senior student at the radio technology faculty, and that's how that group is now named after him. Now, one of the students remained behind due to his poor health, but all the others, the remaining 9 students, well, they made their last camp on the 1st of February, and there's even a photograph left that captured how these students were setting up their tent just the night before they died. Well, the hikers, well, as no signal came from the hikers on the set date, and now a search team went to look for them, and just 6 days later, they discovered the tent that belonged to to these students, and the tent really seemed abandoned, and it was slashed from inside with a knife, and most of the belongings of these students were left there, and it really seemed that the students were leaving the tent very quickly and in a rush. Now, the first bodies were discovered the same month, and 2 of them were discovered wearing only their underwear, and they also had burns on their arms and feet, and the investigators at that time said that it really seemed that as they were coming back to the tent. Now, later in May, the last bodies of the students were found, and really the condition of these bodies just stunned the doctors, as 2 had broken ribs, 1 had a crushed skull with no broken skin, and the other missed half of the face, including eyes and tongue. Now, after that really scary revelations and foundings, a number of different investigations started, both formal and led by independent journalists and scientists. Now, Soviet investigators determined that the hikers were in no state to overcome an elemental force. And after so many years, it really is still unclear well, how and why these 9 students left their tent in the middle of the night, and they tore it from inside, and they just went into heavy snow and the temperature, which was minus 30 degrees.
Madina, so this man that we were talking about who passed away aged 76, Yuri Yudin, who is he?
Well, Yuri Yudin was the only surviving member of the group of 10 Russian students that died in, as I've just mentioned, these mysterious circumstances, really. And throughout his life, he was leading his own investigation, and he believed that the Soviet military had been responsible for the deaths of the students in some way. He said that the government has set some military tests in that area, and that was the main reason behind the deaths of his friends. Now, he even recalled that the authorities at that time, during the first investigation, were more interested in how and why these students wound up in that area than in how and why they actually died and from what cause. Now, reportedly, he was also once asked that if he had a chance to ask God just one question, he said that that would be what exactly happened to his friends that night. So he died, as you just mentioned, at the age of 76, and he will be buried in a common grave in the native city of these students in Yekaterinburg.
Do we know any official results of an investigation that was carried out to determine what had actually happened?
Well, that is really the most amazing part of the story, as after so many years and after more than half a century, it is still not determined what exactly happened with the students that night. Now, all these mysterious facts led to a lot of speculation, and that speculation ended up in several most popular versions behind the tragedy. Now, the first version is that there was an avalanche that night, and that really explains why the students had to leave the tent so quickly and in such a rush. However, still there is not enough evidence to prove that version. Then another version involves this military test that I just mentioned, and that version is supported by the only survived member of the Dyatlov's expedition group. Then there is another version that it was a mass murder and it was conducted by some non-identified people. However, it is really clear that there is no evidence to prove that version as well. And there are other really mysterious versions. Some people even say that there might be some aliens in that area and that they murdered the students. So there's also another point here that a second wave of interest just burst out, especially in Russia, after a Hollywood director released a movie which is called the Dyatlov Pass incident. And it is a horror film, well, no wonder, in which a group of American students shoots a documentary movie which is dedicated to the Dyatlov's expedition group. And in that movie, really in the middle, these American students just find that the history is repeating itself. Well, I haven't seen the movie, but it was reported that the movie really received some negative reviews, but still it is a very mysterious story and no truth has been found to what happened with these students.
Our correspondent Madina Korchinova, and just to remind our viewers, we are reporting on this story as the sole survivor of this expedition passed away. We're talking about 76-year-old Yuri Yudin. Thank you.